Hello, Mitch. It's good to see you.
It's been a while.
It's been a little while. I think about a year. You've been a busy man.
A little bit.
Everybody knows you on my friend Travis's channel, but why don't you reintroduce yourself, because we did a video about a year ago talking about your efforts, and you just recently did a video with Daniela Camboni where several people shared the interview with me and said, do you know this guy? And I said, yes, I've already interviewed him. But tell us a little bit about yourself, Mitch, and why you're getting all of that press right now.
Well, it's from people who actually care about what's happening to their friends and their family and their neighbors. And it's really about the real estate tax and the fact that it's fraudulent. And frankly, it is a violation of the 16th Amendment. So these people that have reached out to me understand how bad this problem is, because it not only affects the property owners, but in fact, it affects every single person in the United States, just the way that the math stacks.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from a lot of people, even in places like Tennessee where we have very little property tax, it's very low, that people are starting to feel like that it's a mortgage, that they don't own their land, that they don't own their property if they have to pay this much property tax. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of this issue and kind of the basis of your argument?
Well, the basis of the argument stems from the fact that under the 16th Amendment, you cannot tax an unrealized gain. You can tax income. What they have done is they've twisted it and created a property tax. And the property tax in and of itself is a violation of the law by virtue of the method of which it is actually calculated. So to your point on the first mortgage or second mortgage, when you buy a house, you have a first mortgage. Through the property tax, not too far from here, about a half hour away, is a town called Argyle. And in Argyle, it's give or take about $323,000 per house in property tax that is outstanding fraudulent bond fraud that has been committed on every single house. So if the value of a house is $450,000, give or take, you've got about $323,000 in the form of a second mortgage, but the second mortgage is in fact bond fraud.
Right.
So it's happening everywhere to a certain extent. Smaller communities have larger dollars of bond fraud, school district bond fraud per house. Larger communities that can spread it out, sometimes it's $70,000 per property. So even a multifamily would have $70,000 per unit of that multifamily and $70,000 per house.
So explain a little bit, because I think the biggest question that I got after your video with Daniela, people were like, explain to me, what is this bond issue? Like, I think that, obviously bonds, things like that are hard for people to understand. Like, exactly how is that bond fraud?
So the bonds occur when a central appraisal district determines a property value. So let's say they overinflate the value, and they overinflate a value, so legitimately $200,000 for a house, but they double it, or they take it up by 50%. Doesn't matter. So you go 200 to 300, 200 to 400. The bottom line is that net delta between its real value, willing buyer, willing seller, cash price, nobody under duress, and it's fraudulent overvaluation by virtue of the central appraisal district bumping the values. That gives them an extra $200,000 worth of value, from which they then say, well, we're going to collect X amount of dollars. So if it's 3%, that's an extra $6,000.
Right.
That's fraudulent. But the cash flow from all that value goes to the school district. 83% of it goes to the school district on average. That 83% is then levered. So they lever that into bonds.
Right.
Well, all a bond is a future IOU. You, the world, are going to give us, the school district, X amount of dollars in exchange for, we're going to give it back to you, but we're going to pay you interest on it.
Right.
So it gets more complex in that when you realize they're not paying those bonds off. They're rolling them out when they come due, which means you started with, let's say, $1 million. Then you still have the $1 million, but in the meantime, every year they keep adding to the bonds, plus you have the compound cumulative interest on the original bond, plus the new bonds, plus the compound cumulative interest. Every year it's stacking up. So if you have a mortgage, on your mortgage, you pay that mortgage off. Every year you're paying it down. That's an amortization
Right.
schedule.
Right.
What they've done is they flipped it. They're literally not paying it off. They flipped it so
Right.
that the cost of carrying is like this.
Right.
Well, it affects everybody for two reasons. One of which is if you buy a bus, a school district buys a bus for 300 grand. In 10 years, that 300 grand is over $1 million. So you're literally paying more for the bus than if you had paid cash for it in the first place.
Right.
But it gets even more complex when you realize, if you stand around here and you look, multifamily, office, everything you want here is here. But when you realize how much debt is burdened on everything you're looking at by virtue of the real estate tax, you begin to see, well, wait a minute, if it's multifamily, if it's industrial, if it's office, if it's single family, it in fact touches the lives of every single person. Because in your cappuccino, do you know that there's 7 elements of real estate tax in that cappuccino?
No.
So as the taxes go up, so does the cost. That's inflation.
Right.
This is part of the problem. So it's touching everything. It's a cancer. And our position is we're going to destroy the cancer because it's going to self-implode whether I'm standing here or not. That's how this math works.
Right.
When you can no longer pull money from mom and pop, which is occurring now, how do we
Right.
know? By virtue of the tax lien foreclosures.
Yes.
And Travis has been tracking this as well. There's no way out of this. This is going to
Right.
blow up.
Right.
And then for those people who say, well, I'm making a good living and it doesn't affect me, well, you're delusional. And here's why. Think of 37%, give or take, of the household population going bankrupt and or losing the roof over their head.
Yeah.
And if you think that doesn't affect you, you're wrong, because that's mom and pop are the U.S. economy. You destroy mom and pop, you de facto destroy the U.S. economy.
And it's contagion, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is something, when I managed default during the crisis, you could see it. I mean, this is what happened, is that they may think they're fine, but if their neighbor loses their job and suddenly can't afford their mortgage anymore and, has to distress sell or it goes to auction, then your property value is impacted as well. That becomes the comp in your neighborhood. And so I think that people they feel insulated. A lot of people do because especially at the top of what we call the K and the K-shaped economy, but in fact they're not. I mean, they're not insulated.
No,
and what I'm
is.
seeing a ton of, for instance, is luxury that is sitting. And what we know happened is back in 21, folks thought everybody was getting rich. And so they built all this luxury, multifamily luxury homes. And so I think that people don't understand that even in the very nice neighborhoods, there's going to be an impact from this as well, because it's even the ultra rich have these tax liens. I've seen it looking in these neighborhoods. And so, it's coming for everybody, whether they want to admit it or not.
There's no doubt about this. When you look at the math, the bottom line is, give or take, you're somewhere between 30 and 38% of the households. That includes multifamily, losing the roof over their head and or going bankrupt.
Right.
This is the math, and it's all because of the real estate tax. And to that point, so if you look at a household income, do you realize that the value of the tax based on the gross income, average gross income of that house, is not the 2% that you're paying, that you think you're paying on the value of your property? It's the equivalent of 8.6% of your gross income for that house going towards real estate tax. The difference between somebody going bankrupt and not going bankrupt is the real estate tax.
Wow.
So when you start to stack the math and you understand this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we filed these suits, and this is why we're going to chase this thing into hell if we have to.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll take it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I would love to see that. But why don't you tell us, since we're talking about it, exactly what you're doing and where you are in that?
Well, we filed 2 suits, and both courts admitted that fraud had occurred. But both courts took the position that, well, you can't do anything about it because it stops at the appraisal review board process. Well, de facto, it can't, because even the Texas Supreme Court, through the Patel case, said, no, if fraud has occurred, this must be heard. Well, we're now at the Texas Supreme Court. And the goal with the Texas Supreme Court is very simple. Please remand the case back to the lower courts so it can be heard on its merits. We want this case tried on the fraud. And so I wrote an amicus brief. Some other people have now put in their amicus briefs on top. It's pretty simple. simply remand the case to the lower courts to be heard. Well, once that occurs, I'm now in the process, it's up to 384 pages, of writing the trial brief. And when that trial brief, we'll release it in little bits and pieces because I don't want the other side to see exactly what's going on, but we will release it little by little. But inside that trial brief are links to over 1,100 evidentiary documents. It's their audio, their video, their being the CADs and the school districts. We've got them on audio, we've got them on video, we've got their transcripts, we've got all their writing. Like on their websites when they say, well, we adhere to USPAP, that's a straight up lie.
Right.
That's a straight up fraud in and of itself.
Right.
They don't, and we've got the evidence.
Right.
And it's not just Denton Central Appraisal District, although that's where ground zero is. This is across Texas, and as we've discovered, this is across the United States.
Right.
Uniform standards of professional appraisal practice may as well not exist.
Right.
The Texas Property Tax Code may as well not exist. The Texas Constitution, which requires uniform and equal, may as well not exist because the central appraisal districts have completely ignored every single element without exception.
Do you think that is, often we talk, is it incompetence or is it actual willful, fraud? What do you think in this case?
Initially, I thought it was incompetence, but initially it was in 2016. The reason why we've done these videos is to put people on notice. When you're being told that you're breaking the law and you choose not to do anything about it, de facto, you've violated federal law. Chapter 42, U.S. Code 1986. Willful knowledge and power to prevent. That's why we've done these videos. That's
right.
why I went to the Denton Central Appraisal District Board, stood in front of them and said, you are committing fraud. We taped that as well. We've got the audio tape. They've been told they're breaking the law. One of those people on that board is actually an attorney, and I intend to have him disbarred.
Well, yeah, he could lose his license.
Absolutely. I intend to have him disbarred. People are going to have to go to jail for this.
Wow.
These are the crimes that they've committed, and it's happening everywhere. The issue that happened with Travis in Montgomery County is just another ramification of this.
Right.
So,
right.
No, it's not incompetence.
Wow.
You can say these people are as dumb as rocks. That may be true. But the bottom line is, they were told you're breaking the law, and they chose to do nothing about it. But it's not just a case of civil law in terms of what's happening, but you've got civil fraud, you've got criminal fraud, you've got RICO, you name it, it's in here.
Right.
They're caught. There literally is no defense.
Right.
Their whole defense was, well, we have immunity. That was their defense. That's why we're at the Texas Supreme Court saying, yeah, no, you don't. You committed fraud.
Right.
And the Texas Supreme Court's own case under Patel says if the case has to be heard because fraud is involved. All we want to expose the fraud.
So what's the next step in that case at the Texas Supreme Court?
In theory, the Texas Supreme Court should come back within 30 to 40 days and say, yes, this case is hereby remanded. The second that happens, we're probably about 60 days out from being able to get it back into a district court, and that's all we need. At that point, we're off and running.
That's amazing, Mitch, and I think that a lot of people get so frustrated feeling like there's nothing that they can do. That the forces are too large to fight against, and they just go and they pay it and they suck it up. And so one of the things that I love is you have a website, there's a petition, there's you guys have really worked to bring other people into this process and also show them that there are things that you can do and that your voice does matter. So tell me a little bit about that, just the outreach.
Their voice matters much more than they realize, and it's extraordinarily important because you have two issues here, one of which is political and the other one of which is going to end up being in reality financial. So on a political standpoint, on Travis's site and on my site, we're informing people on Travis's site especially, he's got a form there that can be filled in. We may be building another site momentarily where people can participate in upcoming class action lawsuits. We're starting to look at that issue right now, assuming we get back to the lower courts. That'll be the first thing we do, because once we win in the lower courts, then tens of thousands of people are going to want to sue because we've done the heavy lifting for them.
Yeah.
So we're getting some help federally out of Washington to accomplish that task. But yes, people should go and sign the petition. Over and above that, if they have the capability, even though a one-page simple letter of agreement with regard to the Texas Supreme Court would be very helpful to tell the Supreme Court, pay attention to this, we support this. Over and above that, every single person should be speaking to their politicians, their local politicians. They should start going to their school district meetings, whether they have children or not, because you will see the fraud firsthand. You will see how these people don't give a damn about their constituents.
Right.
And you need to put them on notice. You're breaking the law. We've now caught you, and we intend to sue you personally. Scare the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Because it's true. They're caught. There's nowhere to go on this.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, talking about how we got here, and I think that it's as if I feel like so many of those folks, especially after the American Rescue Act, when the municipalities got so much money and they got addicted to that money and thought that was going to last forever. And I think it's running out in many of these counties and cities. You can see it all over the country. Everybody's in a budget deficit right now. And so I feel like what's happening is that everybody's holding on to those property values like for dear life, because it really is one of their only, means for revenue.
Okay, let's back up for a second. So the school districts are bankrupt. Let's be real clear. There is no money to pay for this. It's over. It's just a question, it's not an if, it's just a question of when. It's done. So what we're saying is you're bankrupt. The bonds are what in fact has bankrupted the school districts. Money is money. Value is value. With regard to the prices of the houses, when people buy a house, yes, you pay a price, but that is not necessarily the value you received. Mm-hmm. If you pay twice what that house is truly worth, you're upside down in reality by 100%.
Right.
So if you paid $400 for a house that's worth $200, you're completely upside down.
Right.
And you have that 30-year amortization schedule on your back.
Right.
So we just did an analysis, and it's inside the amicus brief, and the amicus brief is on my website. But that analysis said, okay, what if the values in Denton County go down by 10%?
Right.
What happens if they go down by 20%? Well, right now today, we figured out that all the school districts in Denton County are short $20 million a month. That's before we answer the question of the 10% reduction in property values.
Right.
You go 10%, 20%, the 20% plus the $20 million a month, that's $1 billion a year this school district, on what they have committed, cannot raise to cover off the fraud that they've committed. So very clearly, what this is a Ponzi scheme. Mm-hmm. This is Enron. This is WorldCom. This is Silvergate Bank that just happened recently. Mm-hmm. These are Ponzi schemes. When you go out, Theranos was another one, the drug company. Right. None of this was real.
Right.
The data was faked.
Right.
And when you fake the data, you create the fraud. Then they lever that faked data into the bonds. Therefore, the bonds in and of themselves were based on a complete fraud. There's no way out of this.
Right. And so you hear that, right? And so what do you see as what happens? I mean, ultimately, when this starts to unravel?
So the bond guarantee program for the state of Texas allegedly has $57 billion in cash. Our calculations show that the state of Texas bond debt that can't be paid is about $606 billion. That bond guarantee program is insolvent. Even if they said, the state, well, we're sitting on $30 billion of cash that we just siphoned off from everybody else anyway through the sales taxes, 30 and 50 is 80. You owe 606. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the 606 is conservative, because we've had another analysis across the United States. Ours shows 5.1 trillion based on what we can see. What we can't see are the off-balance sheet financing. We can't see the mechanisms of the 313 agreements. We can't see all the energy contracts because all of this is hidden. This is part of the fraud.
Right.
Well, the law firm in Washington, they think it's closer to 17.1 trillion. Now, I can get there a different way. I can just simply say, okay, we're 5.1 trillion. You go out 15 years based on the fact they're not amortizing this and they just keep raising money, and adding more cumulative interest. In 15 years, give or take, you're at 15.3 trillion. That's what happens. You have to cut this off. You've got to kill this cancer, or it'll end up, like I said, the tail's going to end up wagging the dog. The tail is the economy. You hurt 37% of the households, you destroy them, you destroy the economy. It doesn't seem like a lot, like 5.1 trillion against the 37.5 trillion of US national debt. But when you think about it, the tail, that 5.1 trillion being the US economy, mom and pop. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? That mom and pop is the US economy. That 5.1 trillion may very well be the tail that's going to wag the dog. They've got to get involved and kill this off. They've got to put a floor and a ceiling on it and say, we're going to start squeezing towards the middle and start clawing back this money. We claw back the fraud.
So realistically, like, what do you see happening? I mean, because what I see right now in the economy is it's all fraud. NVIDIA, they're doing very Enron style stuff, yet, the stock's going up, and I don't think there's any money left, honestly. I think that, this is one of the reasons we saw what we saw in Helene, in my area in Appalachia, which looks like it did a year ago when it initially happened. There's been some cleanup, but not much. If we had the money, that would have not happened, in my opinion. And so we have this outstanding debt. Of course, it's political, but that was two different leaders that essentially both decided not to help Appalachia in a meaningful way. And so to me, if the money had been there, the help would have been there. And so we're already standing on a house of cards. So what realistically is going to happen from here? Because let's say the economy collapses, which is, to me, it's being propped up right now. What I'm starting to see is a lot of political violence and anger and things like that already. And there's not a widespread understanding of how much of a house of cards this is. So what do you think comes next? Do you expect to really win and see people start taking these actions? Because right now I feel like I don't have any expectation of that.
There's a psychological problem here, and it's been on the go for generations. The psychological problem is that people have been taught to depend on the government. And that is the exact opposite of what we're saying. You can't depend on the government because real estate is all local. The problem with Appalachia is it's too poor for anybody to care. That's the reality. That's what you're fighting. Whereas if the people in Appalachia, just like the people in Denton, it doesn't matter. People are people. But if you stopped and thought about it, well, wait a minute. Why are we depending on the government to take our money and redeploy that money into something that doesn't make any sense when, in fact, they're siphoning off their own existence? This is what people don't understand. If you have a school district, why do you need a $200 million campus? Do you realize that didn't really become kind of the norm until about 30 years ago? Mm-hmm. Remember the word schoolhouse?
Right.
You can go and buy any building you want, a retail strip that's defunct, and turn it into a schoolhouse. This is one of the reasons why people are now saying, I don't want to depend on the government. I'll raise my kids and I'll educate my kids. I've had enough of this.
Right.
He's sitting right there.
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. But that leads me to kind of, we were talking before we started taping about a hotel right around here that got built when it should not have. And you tried to fight it and nobody listened, right? And so we've just gone and we've done things like build $200 million school campuses, hotels that are never going to get used, multifamily that's vacant. And we think we're not China. We don't look at Evergrande, we think that's something they did, but in fact, we did that here. And so few people understand that. And so few people are paying attention on their commutes down 635 or whatever of what's going on both sides of the street. And like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, when is the moment awareness is really going to become, pervasive?
Now, because the reality is, those situations that you just mentioned are economic waves where people overspend, but it was the Federal Reserve that backstopped those banks. So where we are right now, we're back to 2007, given the history of all these Ponzi schemes and all these frauds. But in 2007, it was the Federal Reserve that came in and backstopped the banks. They should never have backstopped those banks. You made those decisions, you go broke. It's that simple. The bank loses, the shareholders lose. This time around, there is no money, because what will happen is if the Federal Reserve decides, well, we're going to rescue this again, recognize what's happened. Since 2007, we're now in 2025. Those debts are up 3.5-fold. Plus, they created more debts. So the 2007 debts, plus every year, gimme. Well, we'll just keep paying this compound interest, and now you got $37.5 trillion in U.S. national debt, not including the derivatives that are off the balance sheet of the $37.5 trillion.
Correct, and that's what people don't understand is that all of that off-balance sheet trading and gambling that goes on. I mean, this is the scene in The Big Short where they, it's Selena Gomez and in the casino, and everybody's betting on her bet, and then behind them they're betting on the bet before, and they're betting, and we know that the shadow, these shadow derivatives are much larger. Some say 2 to 3 times larger than they were
about
back
600
then.
trillion.
Yeah, and so to me, I also feel like there's no way out of this. The Fed can't get us out of this time. But to try and tell people that, they don't believe that. They just think that they're going to just keep saving everybody.
Want to bet? I'll take the bet.
Yeah. And I guess for
I am taking the bet.
Yeah, you are. And I just, to me, it's getting to the point, and I think that one thing that I've found very interesting about what's going on in the stock market is, typically when stocks reach heights like this, there's a euphoria. But what I'm sensing now is just kind of like rage and anger, and it's very different than, I would say, even kind of the run up, post-COVID, like the 2021 run up. And so I don't know. I'm just wondering when are people going to realize, for instance, that NVIDIA is fraud? I mean, to me, it seems like the government can't let that happen, because it is the only thing out there right now that is not just terrible. I mean, absolutely terrible.
Institutional money is piling into 6 or 7 of the top stocks. That's what's happening. But you have to realize that institutional money is mom and pop, 401ks, et cetera. So no matter how you look at it, they're exposed. They're exposed on the real estate. They're exposed in the stock market, their 401ks, their pensions. The point of the matter is, if you don't know where your money is and you don't know what the fees are associated with where your money is, you're making a mistake. Best you learn how to protect yourself, and there's different ways to do that through options, et cetera. But if you're listening to a a financial person who doesn't understand what it is that they're talking about, and you can go to that person and say, what are you doing to hedge my portfolio? And if they say, well, we don't hedge, we just get your money out of there. I mean, you're setting yourself up for a huge fall. And then there's a product online called FinViz, and it's a heat map. And it shows you where the money is moving, but it shows you how many of the other corporations aren't moving, that are down. They're red versus a handful that are green. That heat map tells you the whole story, what's happening in the market. And then Travis was just talking about this the other day. Well, VIX is down, it's hovering around 17. Yeah, but if you know how to read it, you got to realize this is the time that if you go and you buy puts on some of these companies because VIX is low, when VIX is low, that's when you want to buy a put. When VIX is high, meaning it's 40 or 50, at that point you want to sell a put and sell a call. So you're bracketing the market. You don't care what the market does as long as it doesn't bust the bracket. So there's all sorts of things that can be done and people can learn. And that's what we're trying to help people with, is think this through. This is your money. Then the other side of this is, You have the right and the left. Okay. So the left, what you were just referring to with the riots, et cetera, well, that's a ramification of money being stolen. They can't articulate the problem, but it doesn't matter if you're left or right. The same thing is happening to both sides, right? The right doesn't participate in violence, the left promotes the violence, but you've got to look at the underlying issue as to why this is happening. If these people had money in their pocket, most of that wouldn't be happening.
Absolutely, and I think, a couple of things I'll say is this not investment advice. We have to always say that. But what you're saying, just to kind of summarize, is you need to go out, you need to know where your money is, you need to do the research, you need to make sure if you have a money manager, they're doing the best for you. But secondly, what you're saying, and this is something that I'm finding very concerning, is a recent survey that talked about, the various generations and they're okay, whether they're okay with violence or they think that violence is acceptable sometimes. And, for the generations above millennials, that's majority say no, it's never acceptable.
It's not acceptable.
But Gen Z, about 50% of them believe that violence is sometimes acceptable. So to your point, I don't think this is a left or right issue. Like this is all of us issue. And folks are really, it's time to wake up, because the shootings that we've seen, a recent shooting here in Dallas at ICE, the Charlie Kirk murder, if people need to understand, because folks feel like there is no hope, like that's what they feel. They feel priced out of the American dream, that violence is just going to intensify because we are ignoring these very large problems that, like you say it so matter-of-factly, and I think that, and it's right, but that's so far afield of what other people are saying, and so it's, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, like, what point does everybody start to realize we have to stop fighting each other and come together and fight this system?
People have been deluded into thinking the government can fix this.
Right.
The government can't.
That's right.
Mom and pop, regardless of what side you're on, can. The last thing a politician wants to see is 500 people showing up at their front door saying, you either fix this or we're going to show you the door.
Right.
And that's what this is going to take. It's a political issue and it's a legal issue. The political side, if you think about it, the left and the right, let's call it center left, and the right in its entirety aren't really at odds with each other. The left can't articulate it, the right can. When the left can articulate, well, wait a minute, if I had more money in my pocket, well, then I can see clearly. I'm not under financial stress. Remember what I said, 37.8% of the household population is in harm's way of bankruptcy and are losing the roof over their head. That is hellacious. That, you're staring down the barrel of hell.
Yeah.
And when those people, regardless of what strata they're from, left, right, doesn't matter, when they receive a tax lien notice or they can't make the payment on that rent, the government, by virtue of what has happened here, this is at the state level, has turned those people into walking time bombs. They're going to go off. And that's the problem. Whereas if you simply said, okay, we're going to fix this once and for all, and we're going to kill off this real estate, because the difference between going bankrupt in the majority of these houses and not going bankrupt is the real estate tax. When you understand it, and then 500 people show up in Austin at Governor Abbott's office and saying, listen, bud, we're going to show you the door. We just received a letter, so we put a 15-page Freedom of Information Act together and sent it off to Ken Paxton. The response was 2 sentences, one of which was, we are not the repository for the documents, meaning the Attorney General's office, who is in charge of doing under Chapter 45 of the Texas Education Act, he's the sole signator to ensure that there's money available to pay for these bonds. How exactly is that possible, Mr. Paxton, when the Texas bond program is insolvent?
Yeah.
And you're not the repository of the documents.
Yeah, I think in Texas, what a lot of people don't understand is this is one of the fastest foreclosure states in the country. And they do a thing called Super Tuesday on the courthouse steps. And, you know, if you're in Florida, that's a judicial state. It takes at least a year often. Although after the crisis, they got a lot more efficient with those foreclosures. So it could go faster. But in Texas, this happens quickly. Now, I'm not seeing, right now, I think we've been looking at a lot of under the covers of a lot of these different jurisdictions and how many tax liens are out there. Typically, what I've heard is when you have those outstanding taxes, it takes about a year before they're going to actually start taking action. But what are you seeing? Have you seen, what is the appetite for, because what I think is going to happen is the counties are going to get totally overwhelmed, especially here in Texas where you've had a lot of overbuilding and there's a ton of vacancy in these new developments. So I think that pretty soon you're going to have a massive foreclosure wave. And when I say soon, like in the next 18 months, and the counties are going to get overwhelmed. But do you see them starting to take action more quickly?
Our analysis showing that it's ramping up about 7% a month right now. So it's already started.
Yeah.
And it's not just Texas, but certain communities are a little bit wealthier by virtue of the influx of population, and that's covering off what we can't see. But when you go to other communities, Godly Texas, the smaller communities, it's ramping up considerably. It's not 7%, it's closer to 14% add-on every month. But I worked with a few people, so 4 people had reached out, they were in serious trouble. We got them bankruptcy attorneys to file bankruptcy to give them a stay to get long enough.
Exactly.
One of them was out of New Jersey.
Yeah.
Another one was out of Connecticut, of all places, and you would think that Connecticut's fairly wealthy. And this person actually, shockingly enough, had money. This is not a poor person, but he got sideways somehow on this property in Connecticut, and he lives in New York. So we got him a bankruptcy attorney, but people can't think this through because they receive these notices, well, I don't want to deal with this, and they shove it in the drawer.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you've got a huge problem, and then they slap with the fees and everything else on top. So it's as if, well, we're going to kill you to make sure you can't come back and sue us. Well, once we're done with the debt in court, we get remanded back to the lower courts. That's when the real firepower starts, because it's at that point we simply say, okay, fine. We have multiple classes of people here, class actions, one of which is return the money that you stole. Whether that happens or not, a portion of it will somehow. Those people who were foreclosed on through the tax liens, that's another class action. The bond fraud that has occurred is another class action. So they're going to have to deal with this at some point, and that's the point of all this.
So Mitch, I just kind of want to summarize what I think are some really important points that you've been making. One is you have to get involved locally, and we're not powerless. We have a voice, and we have to bring that voice to our local leaders and to others and let them know that we're not going to stand for this anymore. And so I think what you've shown people is that you can do something. And so, of course, we're going to put all of the links in the show notes so that people can reach out. But anything you want to say, just in summary, about getting involved locally?
The key is legal, and the key is political. And political means mom and pop getting involved. You're going to have to go to the school districts. You're going to have to email, write your politicians. But make no mistake, no politician wants to see 500 people showing up on their front door.
Right.
Because that's sending the ultimate message, which is, we're going to bounce you out of here.
Right.
And that's what this is going to take. And then I think over and above all that, what these politicians have got to understand, you cannot sit back and do nothing anymore. You're caught. It's just like Denton Central Appraisal District. You're guilty. The courts have already said fraud has been committed. Now it's time to go after the people who committed the fraud. Right. Let's expose the fraud. Let's go after them. But more important, globally, the government does not work for the government. That's called tyranny. Government for the sake of government is tyranny. Government works for the people. Right. You want to stop this nonsense? All real estate is local. Right. School districts are local. Right. You, the locals, mom and pop, have got to take control of this.
Absolutely.
You put people in that do your bidding.
Right.
You don't do the bidding for those you put in. You have to fix this.
Right, and I think that's where we are, and I think that what folks have to, what I've really been trying to share, we're coming up on the year anniversary of Helene, and my area was hugely impacted, and we have not recovered. And what I really hope is that people don't wait for something like that to happen to them, to understand that the government is not going to be there to save you, and that you have to be you have agency, and you have to act, and no one is coming to help you. And so Travis and I have been out to places like the fires, and we saw very, very much the difference between, say, Altadena and the help they were getting there versus out in the Palisades where the National Guard was. We never saw the Guard in Appalachia. We never saw that kind of help. And so we're living in a time when, if you aren't super wealthy, then you're going to be out of luck. And it's best that you start now, standing up and taking action before something like that happens to you. And that's a message I've really been trying to share, because it's going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen. Something like that will happen. But I'm hoping that with folks like you and your message, that people can have that wake-up call before something happens to them.
The difference between going bankrupt and surviving is the real estate tax, first thing. Second thing is, nobody as a citizen anywhere, it doesn't matter where you live, has the right to do nothing. Because if you do nothing, you're hurting yourself, your pocketbook, you're hurting your family, you're hurting your neighbors, and you're hurting society. And this case is literally proving all these things. These things are all happening simultaneously. All you have to do is look around you. Job one, get rid of the real estate tax. Put some money back in everybody's pocket, kill off these bonds, right? Get rid of the fraud. You've got to pull the fraud out of the system.
Right.
And if you don't pull the fraud out of the system, de facto, the system has no choice but to collapse, because there's no money to pay for the fraud.
Right.
So you may as well put a floor on it and put a ceiling on it, and let's just start squeezing and claw this back. But nobody can sit back and say, well, somebody else is going to do the lifting for me. That doesn't work anymore.
100% agree with that. Well, Mitch, I am very excited to hear what happens at the Texas Supreme Court. I am going to be rooting for you guys and hoping to get the message out. And again, we'll share all of the ways that people can help, because this is, the more help, the louder that we are. Yeah. If we just don't stop talking about it and we keep raising the alarm, then that's when people are going to take notice. And to do that, and this again is a non-violent action, and what we're seeing all around us is violence intensify. And so I encourage everybody to come out and help support you and your efforts, and I'm glad that I could be here in Dallas to do this interview with you today. But any last words, Mitch?
Everybody has to get involved. I mean, this is really what it comes down to, all hands on deck. There's no excuses not to get involved and go to your schools, talk to your politicians, send them emails, bombard them with letters, anything you can do. But sitting still and doing nothing isn't an option, because it's your life, it's your future. Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate you listening to us today. It's important. I think things are escalating, and like Mitch says, you can't stand by any longer.